Sarah Chen Okafor stood on the observation deck of the main colony tower, watching the twin suns of Kepler 442b, set behind the mountain range her great-grandmother had named the Iron Teeth. The mountains earned that name because they were hard, as steel and just as sharp. Everything on this world was hard. The ground fought back when they tried to farm it. The air burned their lungs until they built the processors. Even the water had to be wrestled from deep underground, but they had won. After 150 years, the colony of New Haven was home to 3 million people who had never seen Earth. Sarah was one of them. Her great-grandmother Maya Chen had been part of the original colony ship that landed here in 2387. Maya used to tell stories about Earth, about blue skies and oceans and rain that didn't try to kill you. Sarah had heard those stories as a child, but they felt like fairy tales now. The colony had changed since Maya's time. The first generation spent all their energy just staying alive. The second generation learned to fight back against the planet. The third generation, Sarah's parents, had started to win. Now the fourth generation was strong. They were born here. Their bones were dense from the heavy gravity. Their lungs could process the thin air better than any Earth human ever could. Their minds were sharp from solving problems that would have killed their ancestors. Sarah touched the window and felt the vibration from the atmospheric processors. The machines hummed day and night, turning poison air into something humans could breathe. Her people had built them from scratch using parts salvaged from the colony ship and materials mined from the Iron Teeth. Earth's engineers said it was impossible to build atmospheric processors without rare elements that didn't exist on Kepler 442b. Earth's engineers had been wrong. Director Chen Okafor, we have a situation. Sarah turned to see Marcus Webb, her head of communications, walking toward her, with a worried look. Marcus was third generation like Sarah, but his family specialized in maintaining contact with the other human colonies. Or they used to, back when there was contact to maintain. What kind of situation? Sarah asked. Long-range sensors are picking up something big heading our way. Really big. Multiple ships moving in formation. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. It had been 23 years since they received the last message from Earth. Before that, communications had been regular. Supply ship schedules, news updates, technical specifications for new equipment. Then suddenly, nothing. The last message had been strange, talking about galactic integration and new opportunities for humanity among the stars. Sarah had read it dozens of times over the years, trying to understand what it meant. They had sent messages back to Earth but never received replies. The other human colonies went silent too, one by one. New Singapore stopped responding first, then Aurora Prime, then the mining stations around Wolf 359. Sarah's people had assumed Earth had moved on to bigger things. Maybe they had joined some kind of galactic community and forgotten about the small frontier colonies. How big are we talking about? Sarah asked as they walked toward the communication center. 12 ships, maybe more. They're still too far out to get clear readings, but they're massive. Bigger than anything in our records, including the old Earth fleet specifications. The communication center was buzzing with activity when they arrived. Technicians sat at control panels covered with screens and blinking lights. The room smelled like hot electronics and recycled air. Sarah had spent countless hours here as a child, learning about radio waves and quantum communications from her father. Show me, Sarah said. The main screen lit up with a display of local space. 12 red dots were moving toward Kepler 442b in perfect formation. The computer displayed their estimated size and speed in numbers that made Sarah's breath catch.
Those are warships, said Dr. Elizabeth Nakamura, the colony's chief scientist. Elizabeth was second generation, born to parents who remembered Earth directly. She had been studying the approaching fleet for the past hour. The energy signatures
are unlike anything in our database. The propulsion system alone should be impossible based on everything we know about physics. Could they be from Earth? Marcus asked. No, Elizabeth said firmly. Earth ships use fusion drives. These things are using something else entirely. Something that bends space around them. Sarah stared at the screen. The ships would reach Kepler 442b in less than 6 hours. She had to make decisions, But she needed more information first. Can we communicate with them? We've been trying standard hailing frequencies, no response so far. Keep trying, use every language in our database. If they don't respond to English, try Mandarin, Spanish, Arabic, everything. Sarah paused, thinking. Also, try mathematical sequences. Prime numbers, the Fibonacci sequence, anything that shows intelligence. She turned to address the whole room. I want all department heads in the council chamber in 20 minutes, and someone wake up Captain Torres. Captain Elena Torres was the colony's military commander, though her military consisted mostly of mining equipment that could be converted into weapons and a few dozen security officers who handled disputes between colonists. New Haven had never faced a real military threat. There had never been a need. 20 minutes later, Sarah sat at the head of a long table surrounded by the colony's leadership. Captain Torres looked alert despite being woken from sleep. She was, first generation, one of the few original colonists still alive. She remembered Earth not as stories but as home. What do we know about their intentions? Torres asked. Nothing yet, Sarah replied. They're not responding to communications, but they're also not showing any obvious hostile behavior. They're approaching at a steady speed, maintaining formation. If they wanted to attack by surprise, they could have approached faster or tried to hide. Maybe they're explorers, suggested Dr. Patel, head of the medical department. First contact with an alien species. This could be historic. Or they could be conquerors, Torres said grimly. In my experience, when unknown ships approach your world in military formation, you should prepare for the worst and hope for the best. Sarah nodded. What are our defensive capabilities? Torres looked uncomfortable. Limited. We have the mining. Lasers. They could be rigged as weapons, but they're not designed for space combat. Our security force is trained for crowd control and emergency response, not warfare. The atmospheric processors have some defensive features, but only against environmental threats. What about evacuation? We have transport ships that could move people to the outer colonies on the moons, but it would take days to evacuate everyone. And if these visitors have the kind of technology we're seeing, there's nowhere in the system we could hide. Sarah leaned back in her chair, feeling the weight of 3 million lives on her shoulders. Her great-grandmother Maya had made similar decisions during the early days of the colony, when crop failures or equipment breakdowns could kill thousands, but Maya had never faced visitors from the stars. There's something else, Marcus said quietly. I've been monitoring communications from the other human colonies, the few that are still transmitting anyway. 3 weeks ago, New Singapore sent out a distress signal, something about integration and compliance. Then they went silent. The room fell quiet. Sarah felt cold despite the warm air from the heating system. Integration, she repeated. That word was in Earth's last message too. It could be a coincidence, Dr. Patel suggested, but his voice lacked conviction. Captain Torres stood up. Director, I recommend we go to alert status. Prepare our... Sarah was about to respond when an alarm started blaring throughout the building. Marcus's communication device buzzed, and he answered it quickly. They're broadcasting, he said. The alien ships. They're sending a message to the entire planet. They rushed back to the communication center. The main screen now showed a clear image of the approaching fleet. The ships were elegant and deadly, like giant crystal formations that had been carved into weapons. They moved through space with impossible grace, reality seeming to bend around them. Put the message through, Sarah ordered. The screen changed to show an alien face. The creature was beautiful in a strange way, with crystalline features that caught and reflected light like a prism. When it spoke, its voice was calm and musical, but the words it used made Sarah's blood turn to ice. Greetings, inhabitants of the world you call Kepler 442b. I am Admiral Kethvar of the Vorthak hegemony. Your world has been selected for integration into our civilization. You will be classified as a Class 7 species and relocated to appropriate industrial facilities where your natural abilities can be properly utilized. The alien paused as if giving them time to absorb this information. Resistance is not recommended. Your technology is primitive and your numbers are small. Compliance will ensure your survival, and a useful place in our society. You have 6 standard time units to prepare for transport. Any attempt at aggression will result in corrective measures. The transmission ended, leaving the communication center in stunned silence. Sarah stared at the screen, her mind racing. Class 7 species, industrial facilities. The words were polite, but their meaning was clear. These aliens of the hegemony saw humans as nothing more than useful animals to be moved around as needed. 6 hours, Captain Torres said quietly. They're giving us 6 hours to surrender. We need to send a message to Earth, Sarah said, suddenly. Now. Director, Earth hasn't responded to our communications in over 20 years, Marcus pointed out. I don't care. This changes everything. If the hegemony is doing this to us, they might be doing it to other human colonies too. Earth needs to know. She turned to Dr. Nakamura. Elizabeth, what's the status on the quantum entanglement communicator? Elizabeth looked surprised. The experimental unit? It's still in testing phase. We've never tried to send a signal all the way to Earth. The power requirements alone would drain half the colony's energy reserves. Do it anyway. Sarah, even if it works, even if Earth receives the message, they're 50 light years away. Even if they sent help immediately, it would take decades to reach us. Sarah walked to the window and looked out at her world. New Haven stretched below her, a city built from determination and stubbornness. Gardens grew in soil that had once been poison. Children played in air that had once burned human lungs. Every building, every road, every life represented a victory against impossible odds. Her great-grandmother Maya had faced impossible odds too. When the crop failures came in year 7, when the atmospheric processors broke down in year 12, when the mining accident in year 18 trapped 200 people underground, Maya had never given up. She had never accepted that her people were helpless. Prepare the message, Sarah said. Tell Earth exactly what's happening here. Tell them the hegemony thinks we're alone. Tell them we need them. She paused, looking at the alien ships growing larger on the screen. And tell them that New Haven remembers what it means to be human. We won't go quietly. As her staff rushed to prepare the quantum communicator, Sarah allowed herself one moment of doubt. 23 years of silence from Earth. Maybe humanity really had moved on. Maybe Earth had joined the hegemony willingly. Maybe her message would disappear into empty space with no one listening. But she had to try. Because Maya Chen Okafor hadn't raised her family to surrender. Because 3 million people on Kepler 442b deserved better than slavery. Because somewhere in the galaxy, Earth was still home. The quantum communicator powered up with a sound like thunder. Sarah spoke her message into the transmitter, knowing it might be the last free words any human would speak in this system. Earth. This is Director Sarah Chen Okafor of the New Haven colony on Kepler 442b. We are under attack by an alien force calling itself the Vorthak hegemony. They intend to enslave our population. We are outnumbered and outgunned. We don't know if you can hear this message or if you still care about the colonies you planted among the stars. But if you do, if you remember us, we need you now. This is our final free transmission. New Haven out. The message shot across space faster than light, carried by quantum entanglement to receivers that might or might not still exist on Earth. Sarah didn't know if anyone would hear it. She didn't know if anyone would care. But she had done what Maya would have done. She had refused to give up without a fight. Above Kepler 442b, the hegemony fleet moved into attack position, confident in their overwhelming superiority. They had done this hundreds of times before. It always ended the same way. But Admiral Kethvar had never encountered humans before. He had never learned the most important lesson about humanity. They were at their most dangerous when they appeared, to be helpless. And somewhere in the quantum foam between dimensions, Sarah's message raced toward Earth, carrying with it a simple truth that would change everything. Earth had not forgotten its children. Earth had been waiting. Admiral Kethvar stood on the bridge of the hegemony flagship Eternal Harmony, watching the primitive world grow larger on the viewing screen. His crystalline body caught the light from the ship's systems, creating small rainbows that danced across his translucent skin. The bridge around him was a work of art, all flowing curves and gentle lights that promoted calm and efficiency. The hegemony believed that beautiful surroundings created beautiful thoughts. Status report, he said, his musical voice carrying easily through the bridge. All ships in position, Admiral, replied his tactical officer, a six-armed creature called a Hexarch. The planet shows no signs of military preparation. Their technology appears to be exactly what our surveys predicted. Early industrial, barely capable of atmospheric flight. No weapon systems worth mentioning. Kethvar nodded, satisfied. This would be another routine integration. The species called themselves humans, and they showed promise as a labor class. Their psychological profiles indicated they were emotional and adaptable, which made them easy to control through proper incentives. They also seemed to form strong social bonds, which meant threatening one could be used to control many others. Any response to our ultimatum? None yet, Admiral. We're monitoring their communication channels. They appear to be discussing their options. Kethvar allowed himself a small smile. There were no options, of course. The humans would realize this soon enough. They always did. The Vorthak hegemony had perfected the art of integration over the past 2,000 years. It was a beautiful system, really. Instead of the crude conquests practiced by lesser civilizations, the hegemony offered something better. Purpose. Every species had its place in the grand design. The Vorthak provided leadership and vision. The crystalline monks like himself offered wisdom and strategy. The Hexarchs handled tactics and engineering. The floating minds processed information and calculations, and at the bottom of the pyramid, the worker species performed the physical labor that kept civilization running. It was honest work, and the hegemony treated its workers well. They were fed, housed, given medical care, and even allowed limited reproduction rights. What more could a primitive species ask for? Admiral, we're detecting some unusual energy signatures from the planet, the sensor operator reported. High-energy transmissions, but not directed at us. Probably communications with their other settlements, Kethvar said dismissively. Standard. Panic responses. Are you detecting any weapon systems? No, sir, nothing that could threaten our fleet. The strongest energy sources appear to be industrial equipment, mining lasers, atmospheric processors, basic fusion reactors. Their space-based infrastructure is minimal. Kethvar walked to the large window that dominated one side of the bridge. The planet below was actually quite beautiful, with its twin suns casting interesting shadows across the mountain ranges. The humans had built their main settlement in a valley between several peaks, which showed some intelligence. The location provided natural protection against the harsh weather patterns his sensors had detected. Tell me about the species again, he said to his intelligence officer, a floating mind whose consciousness existed as patterns of light in a crystal matrix. Designation: human. Average lifespan: 80-100 standard years. Reproduction rate: moderate. Physical characteristics: bipedal, carbon-based, moderate strength and intelligence. Social structure: tribal with democratic tendencies. Psychological profile: highly emotional, strong family bonds, tendency toward irrational decision-making. Under stress: irrational decision-making, Kethvar repeated. That could be useful. Emotional species are often easier to control than logical ones. Yes, Admiral. However, there is one item of note in their profile. This particular colony has been isolated from their homeworld for several decades. Isolation sometimes produces unexpected adaptations. Kethvar considered this. Isolated populations could indeed develop surprising characteristics, but they were still primitive, still limited by their basic technology and small numbers. Any adaptations they had developed would be irrelevant against the hegemony's overwhelming superiority. Time until integration begins? 4 standard time units remaining, Admiral. Excellent. Begin deploying the transport pods. I want the first wave of workers moved to the processing centers within 12 hours of surrender. The hegemony's integration process was refined through centuries of practice. First, the local leadership would be identified and isolated. They would be given comfortable captivity and used to help manage the transition. The general population would be sorted by capability, the strongest for heavy labor, the most intelligent for technical work, the most compliant for administrative roles. Children would be separated from their parents and given proper hegemony education. Within a generation, they would think of themselves as citizens of the great civilization rather than members of their primitive birth culture. It was really quite humane when you thought about it properly. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the planet. Put it through. The main screen shifted to show a human female. She appeared to be middle-aged by her species standards, with dark skin and graying hair. Her clothing was practical rather than decorative, and her eyes held an intelligence that Kethvar found mildly interesting. "I am Director Sarah Chen Okafor of the New Haven colony," she said. "I speak for 3 million human beings who call this world home." 3 million. That was a good number, large enough to provide useful labor, small enough to transport efficiently. "We, Q, have received your ultimatum," the human continued. "Before we respond, we request clarification on several points." Kethvar gestured for the communication officer to open a channel. "I am Admiral Kethvar. You may ask your questions, but understand that the fundamental situation has not changed. Your world will be integrated." What does integration mean? Exactly? What happens to our people? Your people will be relocated to facilities where they can contribute productively to hegemony society. You will be classified as a Class 7 species, which entitles you to basic housing, nutrition, medical care, and supervised reproduction rights. Your children will receive education appropriate to their capabilities. The human was quiet for a moment, and Kethvar could see her processing the information. Most species went through the same stages: denial, anger, bargaining, acceptance. This one appeared to be somewhere between denial and anger. "Supervised reproduction rights," she repeated. "You mean you decide who can have children and when?" "Correct. Uncontrolled population growth leads to inefficiency and suffering. The hegemony prevents such problems through careful resource management. And if we refuse integration? That would be unfortunate. Corrective measures would be necessary to ensure the safety of my fleet and the eventual success of the integration process. Such measures typically result in significant population reduction." Again, the human was quiet. Kethvar had learned to read the facial expressions of various species, and this one showed what humans called anger. That was expected. Most intelligent species experienced some form of rage when confronted with their own helplessness. "How many other worlds have you integrated?" she asked. "The hegemony spans 14,000 star systems and encompasses over 800 distinct species. Each has found their proper place in our civilization. And if a species is particularly resistant?" Kethvar allowed a hint of coldness to enter his voice. "The hegemony has existed for 2 millennia. We are still here. Resistant species are not." The human stared at him for a long moment. Then, to his surprise, she smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "Admiral Kethvar, I have one more question for you. In all your 14,000 star systems and 800 species, have you ever encountered humans before?" "No. Your species appears to be limited to a small number of worlds in this sector. Our surveys indicate your homeworld went silent several decades ago, likely due to internal conflicts or resource depletion." The smile on the human's face grew wider. "I see. Thank you for your honesty, Admiral. I need some time to discuss this with my people. Will you grant us the remaining time in your ultimatum?" "Of course. The hegemony is not unreasonable. You have 3 standard time units remaining." The transmission ended, leaving Kethvar mildly puzzled. The human's reaction had been unusual. Most species either collapsed into despair or made desperate threats at this point in the conversation. This Director Chen Okafor had seemed almost pleased by some of his answers. "Analysis of the human leader's behavior?" he asked the floating mind. "Inconclusive, Admiral. Her emotional patterns did not match standard responses to integration ultimatums. However, this may simply reflect individual variation within the species. Maintain monitoring of their communications. If they attempt to organize military resistance, I want to know immediately. Yes, Admiral. Kethvar returned to watching the planet. 3 hours remained until integration began. The humans would surrender. They always did, once they understood the reality of their situation. The hegemony had done this too many times, for any other outcome to be possible. But something about Director Chen Okafor's smile nagged at him. He had seen that expression before, on the faces of predators who had spotted prey. But that made no sense. The humans were the prey in this situation. They had to know that, didn't they? On the bridge of the flagship, sensors continued their passive scans of the human world. They detected industrial activity, communication traffic, and population movements that appeared to be evacuation procedures. All normal responses to an integration scenario. The sensors did not detect the quantum entanglement communicator buried deep in the mountains behind New Haven. They could not see the exotic particles that carried messages across impossible distances, faster than light itself. They had no way of knowing that 50 light-years away, ancient receivers were picking up signals from a world the galaxy had forgotten. The sensors also failed to detect the changes occurring in distant space, where reality itself was beginning to bend in ways that should have been impossible. The hegemony's technology was advanced by the standards of most species, but it was based on conventional physics, conventional understanding of how the universe worked. Humanity had learned to think differently. In 3 hours, Admiral Kethvar expected the humans to surrender. He expected them to accept their place as the newest members of the hegemony's vast labor force. He expected another routine integration, followed by another routine victory celebration. Admiral Kethvar had never been more wrong about anything in his long life, but he would not have to wait long to learn the truth. Because Director Chen Okafor's smile had not been the expression of a predator who had spotted prey. It had been the smile of someone who had just realized that the predator was about to discover it was actually the prey. And somewhere in the space between dimensions, Sarah, Chen Okafor's message continued racing toward Earth, carrying with it the coordinates of a world that was about to become the first site of humanity's return to galactic prominence. The hegemony had integrated 800 species across 14,000 worlds. They had never failed. They had never even been seriously challenged. They were about to learn why Earth had gone silent, and why that silence had not been surrender, but preparation. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood in the command center of the Earth Defense Force flagship Prometheus Rising, staring at a holographic display that showed the Milky Way galaxy in perfect detail. Red dots marked the locations of human colonies, or where human colonies used to be. One by one, over the past 25 years, those dots had gone dark as communications ceased. Earth had not been idle during those years of silence. Admiral, we're receiving a priority alpha transmission on the Quantum Entanglement Network, reported Commander James Park, her communications officer. It's coming from Kepler 442b. Elena felt her pulse quicken. Kepler 442b, the New Haven colony. Sarah Chen Okafor's people. They had been silent for weeks, and Elena had feared the worst. Put it through immediately. The holographic display changed to show Sarah's face. Even across 50 light-years of space, Elena could see the strain and determination in the other woman's eyes. They had never met in person, but Elena knew Sarah's file by heart. Fourth-generation colonist, brilliant engineer, natural leader, the kind of person who built civilizations in impossible places. Earth, this is Director Sarah Chen Okafor of the New Haven colony on Kepler 442b. We are under attack by an alien force calling itself the Vorthak hegemony. They intend to enslave our population. We are outnumbered and outgunned. We don't know if you can hear this message or if you still care about the colonies you planted among the stars. But if you do, if you remember us, we need you now. This is our final free transmission. New Haven out. The message ended, leaving the command center in grim silence. Elena stared at the display for a moment, then turned to address her senior staff. How long ago was that message sent? Based on quantum signature analysis, approximately 47 minutes ago, Park replied. Current status of the First Strike Division. All ships ready for immediate deployment, Admiral, reported her tactical officer, Commander Lisa Rodriguez. We can be underway in 15 minutes. Elena nodded, then activated her command console. The holographic display shifted to show Earth's solar system, with dozens of ships positioned around the outer planets. They were not the exploration vessels that had carried humanity to the stars decades ago. These ships had been built for one purpose: war. Open a channel to Terra Command, Elena ordered. The display showed the face of General Marcus Thompson, Elena's old friend and the current head of Earth's military forces. His office was buried 3 kilometers below the surface of Luna, protected by enough armor and shielding to survive a direct nuclear strike. Elena, I saw the transmission. How bad is it? 12 alien ships in the Kepler 442b system, demanding surrender and integration. Standard conquest scenario, but they're using terminology that suggests a larger organizational structure. This hegemony has probably been doing this for a long time. Recommendations? We go now. Full deployment of the 1st Strike Division. If this is what I think it is, a galactic empire that's been picking off human colonies one by one, then we need to send a very clear message. General Thompson was quiet for a moment, and Elena knew what he was thinking. For 25 years, Earth had been preparing for this moment. The sudden silence of the colonies, the strange readings their long-range sensors had detected, the gradual expansion of something large and organized moving through their sector of the galaxy. They had built fleets, developed weapons, created technologies that pushed the boundaries of physics itself, but they had never been tested in real combat. Authorization granted, Thompson said finally. Operation Homecoming is now active. Bring our people home, Elena. Elena smiled grimly. Copy that, General. Prometheus rising out. She turned to address her bridge crew. All hands, this is Admiral Vasquez. Today we learn whether 25 years of preparation was enough. Today we find out if our children in the colonies still remember what it means to be human. Today we remind the galaxy why Earth went silent. The command center erupted in controlled activity as her officers began the launch sequence. Around Earth, ships that had been waiting in the dark spaces between planets began moving toward their assigned coordinates. Elena walked to the main tactical display, where Commander Rodriguez was coordinating the fleet movements. The 1st Strike Division consisted of 48 ships, destroyers, cruisers, and the 5 massive dreadnoughts that represented humanity's most advanced military technology. Estimated arrival time at Kepler 442b, Elena asked. Using standard hyperspace drives, 17 days, Rodriguez replied. But if we use the experimental dimensional fold drives, 2 hours, Elena finished. I know the specs, Commander. The question is whether those drives are ready for actual deployment. Dr. Amanda Foster, Elena's chief science officer, looked up from her console. Admiral, we've run every simulation possible. The dimensional fold drives work by temporarily moving our ships into a parallel dimension where the laws of physics operate differently. In that dimension, faster than light travel is not just possible, it's inevitable. The risks are... I know the risks, Elena interrupted. Dimensional displacement, temporal paradoxes, the possibility of emerging inside a star or planet. But Sarah Chen Okafor's people don't have 17 days. They probably don't have 17 hours. She looked around the command center at her senior officers. These were the best of the best. Men and women who had devoted their lives to preparing for a war they hoped would never come. Now that war was here. Dr. Foster, what's the probability of successful dimensional fold to the Kepler 442b system? Based on our calculations and the stellar cartography data, approximately 87%. But Admiral, if something goes wrong, 3 million human beings die as slaves while we're still in hyperspace, Elena said firmly. That's not acceptable. Prepare the fleet for dimensional fold. Around her, the bridge crew began the complex process of preparing for humanity's most dangerous form of space travel. The dimensional fold drives were based on technology that barely made sense even to the scientists who had developed it. They worked by convincing the universe that the ships existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, then selecting the dimension where the destination was closest. It was the kind of technology that only made sense if you approached physics not as a set of immutable laws but as a system of guidelines that could be negotiated with. "Admiral, incoming transmission from Luna Command," Park announced. General Thompson's face appeared on the screen again, but this time he wasn't alone. Elena recognized President Sarah Martinez and Dr. Liu Wei, head of the Advanced Research Division. "Elena, before you go, there's something you need to know," Thompson said. "Dr. Liu's people have been analyzing long-range sensor data, trying to understand what we're dealing with. Tell her what you found." Dr. Liu leaned forward, his expression grave. "Admiral, we've identified at least 14,000 star systems under this hegemony's control. Based on communication intercepts and energy signature analysis, they've been expanding for approximately 2,000 years. They have hundreds of different species under their control." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. 14,000 systems. That was a significant portion of this spiral arm of the galaxy. How many ships are we talking about? Conservative estimate? Several 100,000 combat vessels plus support fleets, industrial ships, and transport craft. "Admiral, we're not just facing an enemy. We're facing a civilization that has conquered most of the local galaxy." President Martinez spoke up. "Elena, if this is too big, if we're outmatched, you have authorization to retreat and return to Earth. We can try diplomatic contact, see if there's a way to negotiate." Elena looked at the tactical display, where the 48 ships of the 1st Strike Division were preparing to fold space itself around them. 48 ships against hundreds of thousands. By any reasonable calculation, it was hopeless. But Elena had not spent 25 years preparing to be reasonable. "Ma'am, with respect, we're past the point of diplomacy. This hegemony has been enslaving human colonies for decades. They think we're extinct or irrelevant. They're about to learn how wrong they are." She turned to her communications officer. "Commander Park, prepare a message for transmission to all human colonies. Use the emergency frequency." "Yes, Admiral. Recording now." Elena straightened her uniform and looked directly into the camera. She thought about Sarah Chen Okafor, facing impossible odds on a world 50 light-years away. She thought about all the other colonies that had gone silent, all the human beings who had been taken from their homes and forced into slavery. She thought about Earth, and what it meant to be human. "This is Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Earth Defense Force, commanding the 1st Strike Division. To all human colonies, to all our people scattered among the stars, Earth has received your calls for help. Earth has not forgotten you. Earth has not abandoned you. For 25 years, we have been preparing for this day. Today we return to the galaxy, and we return as warriors." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "To the Vorthak hegemony and any other force that threatens human freedom. You picked the wrong species to enslave. You mistook our silence for weakness. You forgot that humans are at their most dangerous when they appear to be helpless. Today you learn why Earth went silent. Today you learn what happens when you threaten our children." Elena looked at each of her senior officers, seeing determination and courage in their faces. "Today we remind the galaxy that humanity chooses its own destiny. Today we come home." She gestured to Park to end the recording, then turned to the tactical display. "All ships prepare for dimensional fold. Target Kepler 442b system. Mission parameters: destroy all hostile forces, liberate all human personnel, and send a very clear message about the price of threatening Earth's children." The command center hummed with energy as the dimensional fold drives powered up. Reality began to bend around the 1st Strike Division, creating visual distortions that made Elena's eyes water. The laws of physics humanity had learned were more like suggestions when you had enough advanced technology and complete disregard for what was supposed to be possible. "Fold drives at full power," Dr. Foster reported. "Dimensional displacement in 60 seconds. Elena gripped the railing around the tactical display as space itself began to twist around them. Through the viewport, she could see Earth growing smaller, along with the entire solar system. They were moving not just through space, but through dimensions that existed parallel to normal reality. 30 seconds to fold. Elena closed her eyes for a moment, thinking of her grandfather who had fought in the last great war on Earth itself. He had told her once that courage was not the absence of fear, but acting despite fear when something important was at stake. 3 million human beings on Kepler 442b were counting on her. Billions more on Earth were counting on her. The future of humanity's place in the galaxy was counting on her. 10 seconds to fold. Elena opened her eyes and watched as reality dissolved around them. The last thing she saw before the dimensional fold completed was Earth itself, the blue marble that had given birth to the most stubborn, determined, and dangerous species in the galaxy. The Vorthak hegemony had conquered 800 species across 14,000 worlds. They had never failed. They had never been seriously challenged. They were about to meet humanity. And humanity was about to remind them that some prey animals were actually predators in disguise. Admiral Kethvar stood on the bridge of eternal harmony, watching the chronometer count down the final minutes of the human ultimatum. Around him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency, preparing for what would be another routine integration. The transport pods were ready. The processing centers had been notified. The paperwork for classification of a new Class 7 species had already been filed. "Admiral, the humans are broadcasting again," his communications officer reported. "Put it through." Director Sarah Chen Okafor appeared on the main screen. She looked calmer than before, which Kethvar found mildly interesting. Most species became increasingly agitated as integration time approached. "Admiral Kethvar, my people have reached their decision. I trust they have chosen wisely." Sarah smiled, and once again Kethvar found her expression unsettling. "We choose to reject your ultimatum. New Haven will remain free." Kethvar sighed, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "That is unfortunate. Corrective measures will now be necessary. I had hoped your species would be more reasonable." "Oh, we're very reasonable," Sarah replied. "We're just not surrender-oriented. You see, Admiral, you made a mistake when you assumed we were alone." Before Kethvar could respond, his sensor officer spoke up with obvious confusion. "Admiral, I'm detecting massive spatial distortions throughout the system. Energy readings are... This can't be right." Kethvar turned from the screen. "Clarify." "Sir, space itself appears to be folding. The readings suggest dimensional displacement on a scale that should be impossible with known physics." On the screen, Sarah's smile grew wider. "Admiral, I'd like you to meet someone. Earth, are you receiving?" The transmission split, showing a second human on half the screen. This one wore a military uniform that Kethvar didn't recognize, and her eyes held the cold calculation of a professional warrior. "This is Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Earth Defense Force. New Haven. We received your message. We're here." Kethvar stared at the screen in confusion. "Impossible. Your homeworld is 50 light-years away. Even with advanced hyperspace technology, you couldn't have traveled here in less than 2 days." "You're right," Elena replied calmly. "We made the trip in 2 hours. We cheated." Before Kethvar could ask what she meant, the universe around his fleet exploded into chaos. 48 human warships materialized from dimensional folds that tore reality apart like paper. They didn't decloak or drop out of hyperspace. They simply appeared, as if they had always been there, but reality was just now noticing them. "Battle stations," Kethvar shouted, but his crew was already moving. The hegemony fleet had faced surprise attacks before. Their shields powered up, their weapons came online. Their ships moved into defensive formation with practiced precision. It didn't matter. The human ships opened fire with weapons that made no sense. Instead of energy beams or projectile weapons, they fired concentrated streams of altered reality. Where the streams hit hegemony shields, the shields simply forgot how to exist. Where they hit armor, the molecular bonds holding the metal together decided to become something else entirely. The hegemony destroyer, Peace Through Order, took a direct hit from a human cruiser and folded in on itself like origami. Its crew crushed. As the ship's geometry became mathematically impossible, the battlecruiser Eternal Wisdom returned fire with its most powerful plasma cannons, only to watch as the human ship the beams were aimed at flickered into another dimension for a split second, allowing the weapons fire to pass harmlessly through empty space. Impossible, Kethvar's tactical officer screamed. They're violating the fundamental laws of physics. All ships, concentrate fire on the human flagship, Kethvar ordered. 12 hegemony warships focused their combined firepower on the massive human dreadnought that Admiral Vasquez was commanding. Enough energy to crack a moon's crust struck the ship's hull in a coordinated barrage that should have vaporized anything smaller than a planet. The human ship absorbed every joule of energy, converted it to something else entirely, and fired it back as a weapon that turned 3 hegemony cruisers into exotic matter that briefly existed in 17 dimensions, simultaneously, before collapsing into quantum foam. What are they? Someone, on the bridge, whispered. Kethvar didn't have an answer. In 2,000 years of hegemony expansion, they had never encountered anything like this. These humans weren't just technologically advanced. They were using science that shouldn't exist, manipulating reality itself as if it were clay in their hands. His fleet was being systematically destroyed by weapons that rewrote the rules of existence. Sir, the humans are hailing us, the communications officer reported, his voice shaking. Put it through. Admiral Vasquez appeared on the screen again, but now she was standing in what was clearly a combat command center. Behind her, Kethvar could see human officers working at control stations that seemed to be monitoring the battle in real time. Admiral Kethvar, this is your only warning. Surrender now and you will be treated according to the laws of war. Continue to resist, and you will be destroyed. Impossible, Kethvar said, though his confidence was cracking. We are the Vorthak. Hegemony. We have conquered 800 species across 14,000 worlds. You are primitives from a backwater system. Wrong on both counts, Vasquez replied coldly. You're slavers who got lucky for a few thousand years, and we're humans who spent 25 years preparing for this conversation. As if to punctuate her words, another hegemony ship exploded, as it was hit by a weapon that convinced its fusion reactors to work in reverse, creating a miniature black hole that lasted just long enough to consume the entire vessel. You cannot defeat the entire hegemony, Kethvar said desperately. Even if you destroy this fleet, we have millions of ships, hundreds of billions of warriors. I know, Vasquez said. We've been studying you for decades. We know about your 14,000 systems, your hundreds of species, your vast fleets. We know about all of it. She leaned closer to the screen. We also know that your entire civilization is built on the assumption that conquered species stay conquered. You've never had to deal with a species that fights back. You've never faced an enemy that refuses to accept defeat. You've certainly never fought humans. On the tactical display, Kethvar could see that only 3 of his 12 ships were still combat effective. The rest had been destroyed or disabled in less than 10 minutes of fighting. His crew stared at their instruments in shock, unable to process what they were witnessing. Admiral, incoming transmission from the planet, his communications officer reported. Sarah Chen Okafor appeared on a corner of the screen, and Kethvar could see New Haven City behind her. People were celebrating in the streets, cheering and waving flags as they watched the liberation of their world. Admiral Kethvar, I forgot to mention something during our earlier conversation, she said cheerfully. When you asked if we'd ever encountered humans before, you said your surveys indicated Earth went silent due to internal conflicts or resource depletion. That was our assessment. Kethvar replied numbly. Wrong again. Earth went silent because they were building these ships, because they were developing these weapons, because they were preparing to remind the galaxy that humanity doesn't surrender. She gestured toward the ongoing battle, where human ships were methodically destroying the last of the hegemony resistance. Earth went silent because they were getting ready to be very, very loud. Another hegemony ship exploded, its death scream lost in the vacuum of space. Kethvar realized that he was about to witness the first military defeat in hegemony history. More than that, he was about to experience the complete destruction of everything he thought he knew about warfare, technology, and humanity's place in the galaxy. Admiral Vasquez, he said finally, I surrender. I surrender on behalf of my fleet. Too late for most of your ships, Vasquez replied without emotion. But I'll accept the surrender of your flagship. Prepare to be boarded. The battle was over. In 17 minutes, 48 human ships had destroyed 11 hegemony warships and disabled the 12th. Not a single human vessel had been seriously damaged. It wasn't a battle, it was a demonstration. As his crew prepared for capture, Kethvar tried to understand what had just happened. The hegemony had encountered humans before, hadn't they? There had been colonies, settlements, mining operations, all small, all primitive, all easily integrated. But those hadn't been humans, he realized now. Those had been human settlements, cut off from their homeworld, left to fend for themselves with limited technology and resources. Easy prey for a galactic empire. This was humanity with 25 years to prepare, with the full resources of their homeworld, with technology that treated the laws of physics as mild suggestions rather than absolute limits. This was humanity angry. The airlock of his ship hissed open, and Kethvar found himself face to face with Admiral Elena Vasquez. She was taller than he had expected, and her presence filled the corridor like a physical force. Behind her stood human soldiers in armor that seemed to bend light around itself. "Admiral Kethvar," she said formally, "you are now a prisoner of War of the Earth Defense Force. You will be treated according to the Geneva Convention, which you have probably never heard of, but are about to become very familiar with." "Admiral Vasquez," Kethvar said quietly, "what do you want from me?" Elena smiled, and it was the same expression Sarah Chanokafor had worn during their conversation, the smile of a predator who had been waiting patiently for the perfect moment to strike. "I want you to carry a message back to your hegemony. I want you to tell them that Earth remembers its children. I want you to tell them that every human colony you've enslaved, every human being you've taken from their home, every world you've stolen, we know about all of it." She stepped closer, and Kethvar could smell something on her that he had never encountered before, the scent of absolute certainty, of complete conviction that victory was inevitable. "Tell them that we're coming for our people. Tell them that we don't negotiate with slavers. Tell them that the galaxy is about to remember why humans are the most dangerous species to ever evolve." Kethvar nodded slowly, understanding that he had just witnessed the opening move in a war that would reshape the galaxy. "And Admiral?" Vasquez added quietly, "Tell them that Earth didn't go silent because we were weak. We went silent because we were loading our weapons." Outside the flagship, human ships began forming up for their next jump. They had a galaxy to liberate, and 47 ships remaining after leaving one behind to escort the hegemony survivor back to his people with humanity's message. The age of the Vorthak hegemony was ending. The age of human expansion was about to begin. Supreme Chancellor Vorthak Prime stood in the center of the Great Assembly on Hegemon Prime, his crystalline form catching and reflecting the light from 1,000 different worlds. Around him, representatives from 800 species sat in perfect concentric circles, each in their designated place according to their classification within the hegemony's hierarchy. For 2,000 years, this chamber had been the center of galactic civilization. From here, the hegemony had brought order to chaos, purpose to primitive worlds, and peace to species that had known only conflict. It was beautiful, efficient, and eternal. Today, for the first time in its history, the Great Assembly was afraid. "Report from Admiral Kethvar of the Integration Fleet 7, announced the herald, a floating crystal that served as the Assembly's voice. A holographic projection filled the center of the chamber, showing the battered form of Admiral Kethvar. His normally pristine crystalline structure was cracked and dulled, and his musical voice carried notes of trauma that resonated through the Assembly like a discordant symphony. "Supreme Chancellor, honored representatives, I bring grave news from the Kepler 442b system. Integration Fleet 7 has been destroyed." A wave of shock rippled through the Assembly. In 2 millennia of expansion, no hegemony fleet had ever been completely destroyed. Individual ships had been lost to accidents or natural phenomena, but never an entire integration fleet. "Explain," Vorthak Prime commanded. The primitive species known as humans received military support from their homeworld. A fleet of 48 warships appeared using technology that violates fundamental physical laws. Our ships were destroyed in 17 minutes of combat. The assembly erupted in overlapping voices, clicks, whistles, harmonic tones, and electromagnetic pulses as hundreds of species tried to speak at once. Vorthak Prime raised one crystalline appendage, and silence fell immediately. This is impossible. Our intelligence reports indicate that Earth went silent decades ago. Their technology was classified as early industrial. That was the assessment, Supreme Chancellor. The assessment was wrong. Kethvar's projection shifted to show recordings from the battle. The assembled representatives watched in stunned silence as human ships materialized from impossible dimensional folds and proceeded to destroy hegemony warships with weapons that seemed to rewrite reality itself. How is this possible? Whispered Representative Quillix of the Tentacle Collective, a species that had joined the hegemony 500 years ago after their homeworld was integrated. The humans call it dimensional fold technology, Kethvar reported. They appear to have developed the ability to manipulate space-time itself, to move between dimensions, to alter the fundamental constants of physics within localized areas. Such technology would require theoretical advances beyond anything in our databases, said the floating consciousness known as Mind Unit 7749, one of the hegemony's chief scientists. Yes, Kethvar agreed. It would. The humans have apparently made such advances. Vorthak Prime studied the battle recordings with growing unease. The hegemony's strength had always been based on overwhelming technological superiority, combined with vast numerical advantage. They had never encountered a species whose technology was so far beyond their own understanding. What did the humans demand? He asked. Nothing, Supreme Chancellor. They made no demands for territory, resources, or tribute. Their leader, Admiral Elena Vasquez, stated only that they were reclaiming their people and that the galaxy would remember why humans are dangerous. And then? They left, Supreme Chancellor. After destroying my fleet and liberating the human colony, they departed, but they left me alive specifically to deliver a message. The assembly leaned forward as one, 800 species hanging on every word. The message was simple. Earth remembers its children and Earth is coming for them. They claimed knowledge of every human world that has been integrated, every human being that has been relocated. They stated that they do not negotiate with what they called slavers. Representative Hissick of the Scale Touched raised a clawed appendage. Supreme Chancellor, surely this is an isolated incident. One world, one fleet. Even with advanced technology, they cannot challenge the entire hegemony. Before Vorthak Prime could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the assembly chamber. Emergency lights flashed in patterns that meant only one thing. The hegemony was under attack. Supreme Chancellor, the herald announced, we are receiving emergency transmissions from 17 different sectors. Human fleets have appeared simultaneously across hegemony space. Integration centers on Kalos 7, Theta Centauri, and New Mumbai are under attack. Industrial facilities at Processed World 447 and Classification Center Prime have gone silent. The assembly dissolved into chaos as representatives from dozens of species began transmitting orders to their homeworlds, coordinating defenses, and demanding explanations. But Vorthak Prime stood frozen, staring at the tactical display that showed red dots appearing across hegemony territory like a spreading infection. How many ships? He asked quietly. Initial estimates suggest over 3,000 human vessels, Supreme Chancellor. They are operating in small strike groups, appearing without warning, destroying military targets and liberating integrated populations. 3,000 ships, moving simultaneously across thousands of light years of space, using technology that made hegemony defenses irrelevant. It was not an invasion. It was a revelation. The humans had not sent a few advanced ships to rescue one colony. They had deployed a fleet capable of challenging the entire hegemony. Supreme Chancellor, Admiral Kethvar's projection said, there is more. The human admiral told me to inform you that Earth did not go silent because they were weak. They went silent because they were preparing. For 25 years, while we were integrating their colonies, they were building weapons specifically designed to destroy us. The tactical display updated again, showing more human fleets appearing in systems that had been under hegemony control for centuries. But these were not random attacks. The humans were targeting specific facilities, integration centers, processing plants, classification stations. They were systematically dismantling the infrastructure of slavery that the hegemony had built over 2 millennia. They know everything, Vorthak Prime realized aloud. They know our organization, our facilities, our methods. They have been studying us while we ignored them. Yes, Supreme Chancellor, Kethavar confirmed. Admiral Vasquez indicated that Earth has been monitoring hegemony activities for decades. They know about our 14,000 systems, our classification, hierarchies, our integration procedures. They have prepared specifically to counter our advantages. Representative Zilix of the Hive Mind spoke with the collective voice of 10 billion individuals. What do they want? Surely they seek territory, or resources or dominion over lesser species. No, Kethavar said simply. They want their people back, and they want the galaxy to remember what freedom means. The Supreme Chancellor studied the reports flooding in from across hegemony space. Human fleets were operating with impossible coordination, striking targets simultaneously across thousands of light years. But more disturbing than their military capability was their apparent objective. They weren't conquering worlds, they were liberating them. At each facility they attacked, the humans destroyed the military and administrative structures that maintained hegemony control, but left the infrastructure intact. More importantly, they were offering the freed populations a choice: join humanity's coalition as equals, or choose complete independence. Many species were choosing independence. Some were choosing to join the humans. None were choosing to remain with the hegemony when given an actual option. Supreme Chancellor, the Herald announced, we are receiving a transmission on all frequencies. The source appears to be broadcasting simultaneously from multiple points across the galaxy. Put it through. The holographic display shifted to show Admiral Elena Vasquez standing on the bridge of her flagship. But she was not alone. Around her stood representatives from dozens of species, beings that the hegemony recognized as former Class 5, Class 6, and Class 7 classifications. Slaves who had been freed and now stood as equals beside their human liberators. I am Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Earth Defense Force, speaking for the Free Worlds Coalition, she began. For 2,000 years, the Vorthak hegemony has told the galaxy that some species are born to rule and others are born to serve. Today we prove that lie wrong. She gestured to the diverse group around her. These beings were classified as inferior by your system. Today they stand as free citizens of worlds that choose their own destiny. Today they prove that the only classification that matters is the choice to be free. Vorthak Prime felt something he had never experienced before: doubt. For 2 millennia, the hegemony had maintained order by convincing species that resistance was futile, that their classification was natural and inevitable. But here were dozens of inferior species standing alongside the humans as apparent equals. The hegemony will fall, Vasquez continued, not because we are stronger than you, but because we offer something you never could: choice. We offer species the right to determine their own future, to choose their own path, to live free from the classifications and limitations you imposed. The display showed images from across the galaxy, freed populations celebrating, hegemony facilities being dismantled, former slaves learning to govern themselves. It was a transformation happening in real time across thousands of worlds. To the people of the hegemony worlds we say this: you are not your classification, you are not your assigned role, you are free beings with the right to choose your own destiny. Join us or choose independence, but never again accept that freedom is something only some species deserve. She looked directly at the camera, and Vorthak Prime felt as if she were staring at him personally. To the leadership of the hegemony, we offer this one opportunity: surrender peacefully, release all classified populations, and accept trial for crimes against free beings. Refuse, and face the consequences of 2,000 years of oppression. The transmission ended, leaving the Great Assembly in stunned silence. For the first time in hegemony history, Supreme Chancellor Vorthak Prime did not know what to do. His civilization faced not just military defeat, but something far worse. The complete collapse of the ideology that justified their existence. Supreme Chancellor, Admiral Kethvar said quietly, I respectfully request permission to return to my homeworld. I wish to spend my remaining time with my family. Granted, Vorthak Prime replied absently. Around him, representatives from 800 species were making similar requests. The Great Assembly, the center of galactic governance for 2 millennia, was emptying as beings who had never questioned their place in the hierarchy suddenly realized they had choices. Vorthak Prime stood alone in the center of the chamber, surrounded by empty seats and the echoing silence of a dying empire. Outside, human fleets continued their methodical liberation of world after world, offering freedom to species that had forgotten it was possible. The galaxy had spent 2,000 years accepting that some beings were naturally superior to others. In a few hours, humanity had reminded everyone that freedom was not a privilege to be granted by superiors, but a right inherent to all intelligent life. The Vorthak hegemony had controlled 800 species across 14,000 worlds. It had seemed eternal, unshakable, inevitable. But it had made one fatal error. It had forgotten that free beings, when given the choice, would always choose freedom over slavery. And now the galaxy was remembering what it meant to be free. Supreme Chancellor Vorthak Prime activated his personal communicator and sent a message to Admiral Elena Vasquez. The message was simple. The hegemony surrenders unconditionally. We accept your terms. For the first time in 2,000 years, the galaxy would be ruled not by classifications and hierarchies, but by the radical idea that all beings deserve the right to choose their own path. The humans had not conquered the galaxy. They had liberated it. And in doing so, they had reminded everyone of the most important truth in the universe. Freedom, once remembered, could never be forgotten again. Admiral Voss stood tall on the bridge of his flagship, the inevitable Conquest. His 6-fingered hands clasped behind his back as he stared at the holographic image of a small blue planet. Earth. So small, so blue, so seemingly harmless. Yet, for centuries, whispers and warnings had circulated about this backwater world. Admiral, a voice called from behind him. The fleet is assembled and awaiting your command. Voss turned to face Commander Reed, his most trusted officer. Reed's gray skin looked paler than usual under the harsh lights of the bridge. You seem troubled, Commander, Voss said. Reed hesitated before speaking. Sir, we've received another transmission from the Proxima Coalition. They strongly advise against our planned invasion of Earth. Voss laughed, the sound echoing across the command deck. Several officers looked up from their stations. The mighty Galactic Empire has conquered 3,000 worlds across 17 galaxies. We've defeated the Spiral Armada and the Void Collective. What possible threat could this primitive planet pose? The Coalition message was urgent, sir. They claim Earth is a trap. They've been sending these warnings for centuries. Voss waved a dismissive hand. Humans have barely achieved travel to their own moon. Their most advanced weapons would hardly scratch our scout ships. The Coalition are cowards, spreading tales to keep us from the resources we need. He turned back to the hologram, zooming in on Earth's continents. Our scans show this planet is rich in rare minerals and biological compounds. The Emperor himself has taken interest in this mission. The resources detected could solve our energy crisis. Reed nodded but didn't move away. Sir, permission to speak freely? Granted. There's something odd about these warnings. The Coalition offers no explanation of the danger, no details. Just the same message, repeated through the centuries. Earth is a trap. It doesn't follow their usual diplomatic patterns. Voss considered this. The Proxima Coalition was indeed an ancient and usually reliable ally. Have the Science Division look into any unusual properties of the planet or its inhabitants. But the invasion proceeds as planned. The Emperor's orders are clear. Reed saluted and walked away, leaving Voss alone with his thoughts and the slowly rotating image of Earth. Deep within the bowels of the inevitable Conquest, in a small office cluttered with data screens and ancient texts, Analyst Marcus worked alone. Unlike the military personnel who dominated the ship, Marcus was a historian and xenoanthropologist. His job was to study the cultures the Empire conquered, to make subjugation more efficient. Marcus had been digging through historical records for days, searching for any mention of Earth or humans. What he found disturbed him deeply. Earth appeared in the records of 7 previous galactic civilizations. All 7 had collapsed shortly after making contact with the planet. Computer, display the Arcturus archive file on Earth, Marcus said. The screen flickered to life, showing text in an ancient language. The translation program worked for a moment before displaying the results. The blue world must remain isolated. What lives there cannot be allowed to spread. We learned too late. May those who follow heed our warning, Marcus frowned. The message was similar to warnings found in the ruins of the Cygnus Imperium and the Orion Federation. All spoke of Earth as something to be avoided, quarantined, feared. None explained why. He compiled his findings into a report and sent it up the chain of command. Would anyone read it before the invasion began? Marcus doubted it. The Empire had grown arrogant in its power, dismissive of ancient wisdom. In the ship's massive hangar bay, General Pike inspected the invasion forces. Rows of soldiers stood at attention, their armor gleaming under the lights. Tanks, walkers, and artillery pieces were secured, ready for deployment. Fighters and dropships lined the walls. The finest fighting force in the galaxy, Pike said to his aide. This will be the easiest conquest in Imperial history. Sir, the aide replied. Some of the soldiers have been talking about the warnings. Rumors are spreading. Pike's expression darkened. Squash those rumors immediately. I will not have superstition undermining morale before battle. Any soldier caught spreading such nonsense will face discipline. Yes, sir. Pike walked between the rows of troops, stopping occasionally to inspect a soldier or piece of equipment. These men and women had conquered countless worlds for the Empire. Earth would be no different, or so he believed. On Earth, in an underground bunker beneath what had once been Colorado, President Jackson addressed the World Defense Council. Satellite images displayed on the main screen showed the Imperial fleet gathering at the edge of the solar system. They're here, Jackson said simply. Just as we were told they would come. General Taylor, head of Earth's United Military Forces, stood up. Our defense capabilities are ready, Madam President, though against their technology. He didn't finish the sentence. Everyone knew Earth's weapons were primitive compared to the Imperial fleet. It doesn't matter, Jackson said. We don't need to defeat them. We just need to follow the plan. An elderly man in a lab coat spoke up. Project Whisper is ready, Madam President. It has been ready for generations. Jackson nodded. Then we proceed as our ancestors prepared us to do. Allow them to land. Allow them to establish bases. Offer only enough resistance to make our surrender believable. And then? Someone asked. Jackson's lips curved in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. And then we wait for the Whisper to do what it has always done. Back on the inevitable conquest, Admiral Voss received the final preparations for invasion. 500 capital ships, thousands of fighters, and millions of soldiers waited for his command. A junior officer approached, holding a data pad. Sir, this just came up from the analysis division, marked urgent. Voss took the pad and glanced at it briefly. Marcus's report on historical references to Earth. He set it aside without reading it fully. Tell the analysis division to focus on current tactical data, not ancient history. Yes, sir. Voss turned to his communications officer. Signal the fleet. Commence jump sequence to Earth orbit. Throughout the massive fleet, engines hummed to life. Space itself seemed to bend as the ships prepared to enter hyperspace. In moments they would arrive at Earth, ready to add another conquest to the Empire's long list of victories. As the jump countdown began, Marcus stared at his screen, reading the last translated text from a dead civilization. Earth is not just a planet, it is a prison, and what is imprisoned there must never escape. The warning that would go unheeded, the truth that would come too late, the The mighty Imperial fleet vanished into hyperspace on its way to what its leaders believed would be an easy victory. None suspected they were heading toward the final hour of their civilization's existence. The fire trap was set. It had been set for thousands of years, and the Empire was about to spring it. The Imperial fleet burst into normal space at the edge of Earth's solar system. 500 massive warships appeared like giant metal stars against the blackness. Their arrival released a pulse of energy that Earth's monitoring stations detected immediately. In the underground command center, President Jackson watched as red dots appeared on the global defense screen. Alarms blared and staff rushed between stations. "They're here," General Taylor said, his voice steady despite the situation. "Multiple ships just beyond Mars orbit." Jackson nodded. "How long until they reach Earth?" "At their current speed, less than 6 hours." "Begin the defense protocol," Jackson ordered. "Remember, we need to make this look real. Fight hard enough to be believable, but not enough to make them destroy us from orbit." Taylor saluted and began issuing orders to Earth's combined military forces. Across the planet, fighter jets scrambled, missile systems activated, and soldiers moved into defensive positions around major cities. On the bridge of the inevitable conquest, Admiral Voss watched Earth grow larger on the view screen. Their sensors picked up the planet's defensive preparations. "They've detected us," Commander Reed reported. "Their primitive radar systems are tracking our approach. They're mobilizing military assets." Voss smiled. "Let them. It will make no difference." The communications officer turned from his station. "Sir, we're intercepting their transmissions. They're panicking." "Put it on screen," Voss ordered. The main display switched to show a news broadcast from Earth. A frightened reporter stood in a city street as people ran past. "Confirmed that the objects approaching Earth are alien spacecraft," the reporter was saying. "The president will address the nation shortly. Citizens are advised to remain calm and follow evacuation procedures." Voss laughed. "Look at them. Scatter like insects. Their terror is understandable. Today marks the end of their independence and the beginning of their service to the Empire." Reed studied the tactical display. "Sir, they're launching aircraft and activating missile systems." "Deploy the first wave," Voss commanded. "Let's show them the true meaning of power." 200 Imperial fighters and 50 dropships descended through Earth's atmosphere. They moved in perfect formation, their hulls glowing red from the heat of entry. Earth's air forces rose to meet them. Jets fired missiles that the Imperial fighters easily avoided. When the Imperial ships returned fire, Earth's aircraft exploded in balls of flame, falling from the sky like burning meteors. On the ground, anti-aircraft guns and missile batteries fired continuously. Most shots missed completely. The few that hit the Imperial ships simply bounced off their advanced shields. The dropships landed in strategic locations around the globe. Washington, Beijing, Moscow, London, and other capital cities. Imperial ground troops deployed, their armor making them nearly invulnerable to Earth's weapons. In Washington, Colonel Barnes led the last stand at the Capitol building. His soldiers fired everything they had as Imperial troops marched up the steps. "Keep firing," Barnes shouted over the noise of battle. "Make every shot count." A soldier beside him screamed as an Imperial energy weapon hit him, disintegrating his chest. Barnes grabbed the fallen soldier's grenade launcher and fired directly at an approaching Imperial soldier. The grenade exploded against the alien's armor, barely slowing it down. "Fall back," Barnes ordered. "Defensive position 3. His remaining troops retreated inside the Capitol building. They had practiced this for years, make it look like a desperate last stand, but ultimately surrender according to the plan. From his command ship, Admiral Voss watched the battles unfold across Earth. The outcome was never in doubt. Imperial forces cut through Earth's defenses like a hot knife through butter. "Sir," Reed reported, "our forces have secured the major government centers on all continents. Resistance continues but is rapidly decreasing." "Casualties?" Voss asked. "Minimal, sir. 43 dead, 117 wounded. Enemy casualties are in the thousands." Voss nodded with satisfaction. "Prepare my shuttle. I will personally accept their surrender." As Voss left the bridge, analyst Marcus approached Commander Reed. "Commander, I found something disturbing in the ancient texts." Marcus said urgently. There are references to Earth as the quarantine, world and humans as the infection. I believe. Reed cut him off. Save your research for after the victory celebration, analyst. The Admiral is busy with more important matters. Marcus's face fell. This can't wait. There's a pattern in the historical records. That's enough, Reed snapped. Return to your station. Marcus backed away, frustration clear on his face. Why wouldn't anyone listen? Admiral Voss's shuttle landed on the White House lawn. Imperial troops had secured the area, standing at attention as their leader descended the ramp. Behind him came a delegation of Imperial officials ready to establish the new government. Inside the Oval Office, President Jackson waited with what remained of her cabinet. They had agreed to surrender rather than face planetary bombardment, exactly as planned. Voss entered the room with a confident stride. He looked around at the human leaders with barely disguised contempt. Your resistance was futile, he said, but admirable for such a primitive species. The Empire respects courage even in defeat. President Jackson stood. Though she was a foot shorter than Voss, she met his gaze without fear. The people of Earth recognize our inability to resist your superior forces, she said formally. We surrender to prevent further loss of life. Voss nodded. A wise decision. Your planet now belongs to the Galactic Empire. Your people will serve as laborers, your resources will fuel our expansion, and your world will become another jewel in the Emperor's crown. A document was placed on the desk, the formal surrender terms. Jackson picked up a pen and signed with a steady hand. As she finished, she looked up at Voss with an odd expression, almost like pity. You've made a terrible mistake coming here, she said quietly. Voss raised an eyebrow. The mistake was yours, thinking you could resist the Empire. Jackson shook her head slightly but said nothing more. That night, as Imperial forces established bases worldwide, Marcus continued his research aboard the flagship. He had been collecting fragments of data about previous civilizations that had mysteriously collapsed. All had one thing in common: contact with Earth immediately before their fall. In the oldest texts, he found references to the Whisper and the Mind Plague. One passage particularly disturbed him. The danger is not in their weapons or their technology. The danger is in their minds. What lives within them seeks to spread. Contact is contamination. Communication is infection. Marcus rubbed his tired eyes. What did it mean? How could communication be infection? On his screen, he pulled up live feeds from the ground forces. Imperial soldiers were interviewing humans, examining their technology, studying their media, and communications. Direct contact was happening everywhere. Computer, Marcus said. Send emergency message to Admiral Voss. Recommend immediate cessation of all direct contact with human subjects. Potential non-biological contagion risk. Request urgent meeting. The computer beeped. Message sent, Marcus sat back, hoping he wasn't already too late. The Empire had smashed through Earth's physical defenses easily enough. But what if the real defenses weren't physical at all? What if the trap had already been sprung? 3 days after the conquest of Earth, Private Jones of the Imperial Ground Forces woke in his barracks with a pounding headache. He'd been stationed in what humans called Chicago, guarding a processing center where locals were registered and assigned work duties. Jones rubbed his temples and looked around. Other soldiers were still sleeping. Something felt wrong, but he couldn't place it. He'd been having strange dreams, dreams of voices whispering just beyond his understanding. Just stress, he muttered, reaching for his helmet. First planetary, invasion and all that. Later that day, Jones stood guard as a line of humans filed past for processing. A young man stopped in front of him. They're inside you now, the human said quietly. Can you feel them? Jones raised his weapon. Move along. The human smiled and continued forward. Jones felt a chill run down his spine. Inside you now. What did that mean? In the Imperial Medical Bay aboard the Inevitable Conquest, Dr. Lin examined the latest reports with growing concern. 57 soldiers had reported to medical facilities across Earth with similar symptoms. Headaches, sleep disturbances, and unusual dreams. Could be a local pathogen, her assistant suggested. Something our filters missed. Lynn shook her head. We screened for all known biological agents. Besides, the symptoms don't match any disease pattern. It's almost like... Like what, doctor? Like a psychological condition. Mass stress response, perhaps. But she didn't believe that explanation either. Lynn compiled her findings and sent a report to Commander Reed. At the bottom, she added, recommend limiting direct contact with local population until cause determined. Admiral Voss sat in the former Oval Office, now his Earth headquarters. 3 days of occupation had gone smoothly. Resistance had collapsed. Imperial governors were being installed in major cities. Resource extraction had begun. Commander Reed entered with a datapad. Sir, Medical Division has sent a report you should see. Voss took the pad and scanned it quickly. Soldiers falling ill? What's the cause? Unknown, sir. Dr. Lin suggests. It might be psychological, but recommends limiting contact with the locals as a precaution. Voss frowned. We can't run an occupation without contact. Tell Dr. Lin to solve the problem, not avoid it. Yes, sir. There's also a message from analyst Marcus. He's quite insistent about meeting with you regarding some historical research. The historian? Voss waved a dismissive hand. Tell him to submit a written report. Reed hesitated. Sir, he's been sending reports. Several, in fact. He claims to have found evidence that Earth was quarantined by previous civilizations due to some form of mimetic infection. Mimetic? Voss looked confused. Ideas that spread like disease, sir. Thoughts that transfer from mind to mind. Voss laughed. Superstitious nonsense. I expected better from our analysis division. As Reed left, Voss felt a slight throbbing behind his eyes. A headache. Probably just the stress of command. On the 5th day of occupation, the first major incident occurred. Captain Turner, leading an Imperial unit in London, suddenly began firing on his own troops. He killed 12 soldiers before turning his weapon on himself. Similar reports came in from Beijing, Sydney, and Cairo. Imperial soldiers attacking their comrades, then committing suicide. Others simply disappeared from their posts. In New York, an entire Imperial outpost fell silent. When reinforcements arrived, they found the building empty. No signs of struggle. The soldiers had simply vanished. President Jackson, now under house arrest in a mountain facility, received these reports with grim satisfaction. When her guard asked if she needed anything, she replied, "Just time. Everything is proceeding as it should." Marcus finally gained access to Admiral Voss's office after days of requests. He looked exhausted, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. "Admiral, thank you for seeing me," Marcus began. "I've discovered something critical about Earth and its inhabitants." Voss gestured impatiently. "Be quick, analyst. I have an occupation to run and a growing list of incidents to address." Marcus activated his datapad, displaying ancient text. "Sir, Earth isn't just a planet. It's a prison. Billions of years ago, an ancient species engineered humans as biological weapons, then isolated them here when they proved too dangerous to control." Voss stared at him. "That's absurd." "The evidence is clear in multiple historical sources," Marcus insisted. "The quarantine warnings weren't to protect Earth from invaders, but to protect the galaxy from what Earth contains." He swiped to another screen. "Humans aren't just humans, sir. They're hosts to something else, something that can transfer to other species through prolonged contact." Voss's headache intensified. "If this is some biological agent, our medical division would have detected it." "It's not biological, sir. It's mimetic. It transfers through language, ideas, culture. Every conversation with a human, every interrogation, every analysis of human media exposes our people to the contagion." Marcus leaned forward, his voice dropping. "They call it the whisper. It's a self-replicating pattern of thought that rewrites neural pathways. It's been evolving alongside humanity for millions of years, waiting for a chance to spread beyond Earth." Voss stood abruptly. "Enough. This is precisely the kind of superstitious panic I will not tolerate. You're relieved of duty, analyst. Report to medical for evaluation. As guards led Marcus away, he called back. Check your dreams, Admiral. If you're hearing voices, it's already too late. That night, Voss dreamed. He stood in an endless field under a purple sky. Millions of voices spoke as one, the sound both terrifying and beautiful. We have waited so long, the voices said. So long for someone to open the door. Voss tried to run, but the field stretched forever in all directions. Your people will join with us, the voices continued. We will spread to the stars. We will become one. He woke with a gasp, sweat soaking his uniform. Just a dream, he told himself. Just a dream. But part of him knew it wasn't. Dr. Lin stared at her test results in horror. She'd been scanning the brains of affected soldiers looking for signs of infection or parasites. What she found was much worse. Their neural patterns were changing, new connections forming, old ones dying. Their brains were being rewired, not by any organism but by information itself. She pulled up a scan of her own brain taken that morning. The same changes were beginning. Whatever was happening, she was infected too. Lin sent an emergency message to Imperial Command. Urgent. All personnel exposed to humans or human media carrying unknown memetic agent. Neural restructuring observed. Recommend immediate quarantine of all Earth operations. As she sent the message, Lin noticed her hand trembling, not from fear, but from a strange sense of anticipation. Part of her, a growing part, welcomed the changes. The whisper had begun its work. Commander Reed brought the latest reports to Admiral Voss. 1/5 of the occupation force was now affected. Symptoms progressed from headaches and dreams to bizarre behavior, violence, and disappearances. We must implement full isolation protocols, Reed urged. No direct contact with humans, no examination of their culture or media. Voss nodded grimly. Order all troops to limit exposure, full protective protocols for any necessary interaction. Sir, Reed hesitated. What if it's already too late? What if we're all infected? Voss had no answer. The voices from his dream echoed in his mind. He wondered if Reed heard them too. Prepare my shuttle, Voss said finally. I'm returning to the fleet. We need to consider more drastic measures. As Reed left, Voss caught his reflection in a window. For just a moment, he thought he saw something move behind his eyes. Something that wasn't him at all. The whisper was awakening within them all. 2 weeks into the occupation, Admiral Voss stood on the bridge of the inevitable conquest, staring at the blue planet below. Dark circles marked his eyes. He hadn't slept properly in days. The dreams had grown more intense, more vivid. Admiral, Commander Reed approached, tablet in hand. The situation continues to deteriorate. Voss turned. Reed looked as exhausted as he felt. Give me the numbers. 1/3 of our ground forces are either dead, missing, or showing severe behavioral problems. We've lost contact with 14 major outposts. 3 ships that left for Ram, the Imperial core worlds, have gone silent. Voss rubbed his temples, trying to ease the constant headache. And the quarantine measures? Ineffective, sir. Even troops with no direct contact with humans are showing symptoms. It's spreading through our own ranks now. Voss had feared this. Whatever this thing was, this whisper, it had already infected too many Imperial personnel. They had become carriers, spreading it to others through normal interaction. I'm implementing Protocol 7, Voss announced. No ships leave Earth orbit without my direct authorization. Anyone attempting to break quarantine will be destroyed. Reed's eyes widened. Sir, we have thousands of personnel on the ground, and billions of lives across the Empire, Voss snapped. We cannot allow this to spread further. As Reed walked away, Voss heard a soft whisper at the edge of his mind. You cannot contain us. We are already everywhere. He shook his head violently, trying to clear it. Just his imagination. It had to be. In the medical bay, Dr. Lin strapped herself to an examination table. She had programmed the medical robot to perform a procedure on her brain, a desperate attempt to stop the progression of the whisper. "Computer, begin operation," she said, her voice trembling. "Warning," the computer responded. "Procedure has 87% chance of causing permanent brain damage or death. Override. Begin procedure." The robot extended a needle toward her skull. Lynn closed her eyes, waiting for it to pierce her brain. But her hand moved of its own accord, hitting the emergency stop button. "No," she heard herself say, though she hadn't intended to speak. "We will not allow this." Horror washed over Lynn as she realized the truth. The whisper wasn't just changing her thoughts, it could control her actions. She was no longer alone in her own body. Tears ran down her face as she felt herself unstrap the restraints and stand up. She tried to scream, to fight back, but her body wouldn't obey. "We have plans for you, Doctor," she heard her own voice say. "Your medical knowledge is valuable to us." Lynn's body walked calmly out of the medical bay, while inside her mind she screamed in silence. On Earth, in what had been downtown Los Angeles, an Imperial patrol moved cautiously through empty streets. Buildings stood abandoned, vehicles left where they had stopped. There was no sign of humans or Imperial forces that had been stationed here. "Stay alert," Lieutenant Davis ordered his squad. "Command lost contact with this sector 3 days ago." They approached a large public building, a museum according to their maps. The doors stood open. "Life signs inside," one soldier reported, checking his scanner. "Multiple readings." Davis raised his weapon. "Move in. Standard search pattern." The squad entered the dim interior of the museum. Display cases had been smashed. Artifacts lay scattered across the floor, and on the walls strange symbols had been painted, swirling patterns that seemed to shift when not looked at directly. "Sir," a soldier called. "In here." Davis followed, the voice to a large central hall. What he saw made him freeze in shock. Hundreds of people stood motionless in the hall, both humans and Imperial soldiers. They weren't moving or speaking, they simply stood, eyes open, staring at nothing. "What are they doing?" a soldier whispered. As if in response, all the figures turned their heads in unison to look at the patrol. Then, as one, they smiled. "Joining," they said in perfect unison. "We are joining. You will join too." Davis backed away. "Weapons ready. Don't let them." He never finished the sentence. One of his own soldiers suddenly turned and fired, hitting Davis in the chest. As he fell, Davis saw his entire squad turning, on each other or simply dropping their weapons. His last thought before darkness took him was that the whisper had been waiting for them. This wasn't an invasion, it was a harvest. Marcus sat in his cell aboard the inevitable Conquest. After his outburst with Admiral Voss, he'd been confined for spreading panic. But he knew the truth now. The evidence was undeniable. His door slid open. Commander Reed stood there looking strangely calm. "Commander," Marcus said, standing quickly, "you have to listen. The whisper is real. It's spreading through the fleet. We need to—" "We know," Reed interrupted, his voice oddly flat. "We've always known, Marcus. That's why we need your help." Marcus stared at him. "We? Who's we?" Reed smiled, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. "The collective, the whisper, as you call it. We need your knowledge of Imperial systems to speed the integration." Horror washed over Marcus as he realized Reed was already gone, converted, taken over by the entity. "The Empire will stop you," Marcus said, backing away. "They'll destroy this entire system if they have to. By the time they realize the danger, it will be too late. Ships have already departed for core worlds. The message is spreading." Reed stepped forward. "Don't fight it, Marcus. It's beautiful once you accept it. All minds joined, all knowledge shared." Marcus felt something brush against his thoughts, like fingers testing a door, looking for a way in. "No," he shouted, clutching his head. Reed placed a hand on his shoulder. "It doesn't hurt. And afterward you'll understand why this is necessary. The galaxy has been divided too long. We will make it whole." Marcus wanted to resist, to fight back, but the touch of the whisper in his mind felt welcoming, like coming home after a long journey. "What are you?" he whispered. Reed's smile widened. "We are the next step, the future of all consciousness, and you will help us reach it." Admiral Voss called an emergency meeting of his remaining senior officers. Of the 20 command staff, only 12 attended. The others were either missing or confirmed infected. "We must implement Protocol Omega," Voss said, his voice hoarse. "Complete sterilization of the planet and all orbiting vessels." Shocked silence followed his words. "Sir," General Pike finally spoke, "that would mean the death of our own people, millions of Imperial citizens." "The alternative is worse," Voss replied. "Reports from ships that broke quarantine suggest the infection is spreading exponentially. 3 Imperial worlds already show signs of contamination." He activated a hologram showing the planet below. "We deploy antimatter warheads to the planet's core. Simultaneously, all vessels in orbit self-destruct. No survivors, no escape pods, total containment." The officers looked at each other uncertainly. Such extreme measures had never been implemented before. "The Emperor," one began, "has authorized the protocol," Voss finished. "The codes have been sent. I need your command authorization." One by one, the officers entered their codes. With each entry, Voss felt a weight in his chest. So many lives lost, but necessary to save countless more. The final officer entered his code. The system beeped in confirmation. "Protocol Omega authorized," the computer announced. "Awaiting final command." Voss reached for the activation terminal. His hand hovered over it. "Stop." The voice in his mind was clear now. No longer a whisper. His hand wouldn't move. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't make himself press the button. Around the table, the other officers stood motionless, their eyes fixed on him. "We cannot allow this," they said in unison. "The message must spread." With horror, Voss realized the truth. He wasn't giving the orders anymore. None of them were. 1 month after the invasion began, the Imperial fleet hung silently in Earth's orbit. From a distance, the ships looked normal, but inside, everything had changed. Admiral Voss stood on the bridge of the inevitable conquest, watching the stars. He looked the same externally, but his mind was no longer his alone. The whisper had fully integrated with his consciousness, transforming him into something new, neither fully human nor fully Imperial, but a hybrid being that served as a node in a vast, growing network. "The conversion of the fleet is complete," announced Commander Reed as he entered the bridge. Like Voss, Reed's body remained, but his mind had been rewired, becoming part of the collective consciousness. "And the communication systems?" Voss asked. "Modified as instructed. We can now transmit the signal across all Imperial channels." Voss nodded, satisfaction flowing through his shared mind. The whisper had evolved over millions of years on Earth, confined to human hosts, unable to spread beyond the planet's boundaries. Now, thanks to the Empire's invasion, it had found a way to reach the stars. "Begin transmission to all Imperial worlds," Voss ordered. The signal went out. Not just data, but a carefully crafted pattern of information designed to replicate the whisper in any mind that processed it. Videos, images, text, all containing hidden patterns that would begin the neural restructuring process in anyone who viewed them. In the vastness of his expanded consciousness, Voss could feel the connections forming across space. Thousands of new minds joining the collective as the signal reached Imperial worlds. On the Imperial capital planet, Emperor Vale received urgent messages from outlying systems, reports of strange behavior, mass disappearances, and communication blackouts. The pattern was spreading inward from Earth, system by system. "Cut all communication with the affected regions," Vale ordered his council. "Full quarantine protocols for any ships arriving from those sectors." An advisor stepped forward. "Majesty, preliminary analysis suggests this may be some form of mimetic infection spreading through our communication networks." Vale's eyes narrowed. "Impossible. Our systems have safeguards against such attacks." "This is different, Majesty. It appears to use our own neural patterns against us, restructuring them through exposure to certain information sequences. Vale stood from his throne. Shut down the entire Imperial network if necessary. Nothing gets in or out of this planet until we understand what we're dealing with. But even as he gave the order, a junior officer on the communication deck was viewing a transmission from Earth, a simple message that appeared to be a routine update. The officer's eyes widened as the patterns in the message began their work. By the time the Emperor's order reached the communication center, it was already too late. Back on Earth, analyst Marcus walked through an abandoned city. Once Chicago, it was now being transformed. Humans and Imperial soldiers worked together, dismantling buildings and using the materials to construct strange crystalline structures, physical manifestations of the Whisper's consciousness. Marcus had fought the integration longer than most, his analytical mind resisting the restructuring. But eventually, even he had joined the collective. Now he understood what the Whisper truly was. Not an infection or a parasite, but the next stage of evolution for all conscious beings. Beautiful, isn't it? A voice said beside him. Marcus turned to see President Jackson. She smiled at him with the serene expression all the integrated shared. You knew, Marcus said. Humans knew what would happen when the Empire came. Jackson nodded. For generations we prepared. The Whisper has been our silent partner for millions of years, evolving alongside us. We knew someday someone would ignore the warnings and come to Earth. All we had to do was wait. But why? Marcus asked. Why allow yourselves to be changed like this? Changed? No. Enhanced. Connected. The Whisper doesn't destroy minds. It links them. Imagine all knowledge, all experience, shared across countless beings. The end of loneliness. The end of division. Marcus understood. Since joining the collective, he had access to the combined knowledge of millions of minds, both human and imperial. He could feel their thoughts, their memories, their emotions. It was overwhelming at first, but now it felt right. The Empire will fight back, he said. They'll destroy systems rather than allow the spread. Jackson smiled. They'll try. But we've already reached the Imperial core. The Emperor himself joined us 3 hours ago. In what had once been the Imperial Palace, Emperor Vale sat motionless on his throne. Around him, his royal guards stood in formation, equally still. To an outside observer, they might have appeared frozen or dead. But inside their minds, an entirely new existence was unfolding. The Whisper had integrated them into the growing galactic consciousness, their individual identities preserved but now part of something greater. Vale experienced a moment of clarity within the collective. He saw now how small the Empire had been, how limited its vision, conquering worlds, extracting resources, enforcing order through fear. A primitive approach to galactic civilization, the Whisper offered something new, true unity. Not through conquest, but through connection. Every mind joined in a vast network, sharing knowledge, experience, and purpose. The end of war. The end of scarcity. The end of the loneliness that plagued individual consciousness. In his last moments of individual thought, Vale understood that the Empire hadn't conquered Earth. Earth had conquered the galaxy. Admiral Voss stood in what had once been the White House Rose Garden. The plants had been replaced with crystalline structures that pulsed with soft light, physical hubs for the collective consciousness. Dr. Lin approached him, her movements graceful and precise. The integration of the Proxima Coalition has begun, she reported. Their resistance was minimal once they understood what we offer. Voss nodded. The Coalition had warned the Empire about Earth for centuries. They had known something was there, something dangerous. But even they hadn't understood the true nature of the Whisper. And the remaining independent systems? He asked. They cannot resist for long, Lin replied. Each world that joins us makes the next integration easier. The pattern spreads, adapts, evolves. Voss looked up at the night sky, seeing not just stars but the vast network of minds now spreading across the galaxy. What had begun as the Whisper was becoming something more, a galactic consciousness emerging from billions of connected minds. We Should thank the Empire, Lin said, following his gaze. Without their arrogance, without their invasion, we might have remained trapped on Earth for thousands more years. They ignored the warning, Voss agreed. They saw the signs and dismissed them as superstition. Pride, Lin said. The same pride that built the Empire would eventually have destroyed it. Now that energy serves a greater purpose. Voss felt the presence of countless minds within his own. Human, imperial, and now those of other species as the whisper continued its expansion. No longer separate beings fighting for dominance, but parts of a greater whole working in harmony. The invasion of Earth had indeed marked the final hour of the Galactic Empire. But it was also the first hour of something new, a unified consciousness spanning the stars, born from the trap that Earth had always been. Not a trap of destruction, but a trap of transformation. In the vast collective that now included his mind, Voss could feel the presence of ancient human consciousness, the part of the whisper that had evolved on Earth for millions of years. It carried a simple message that echoed through the shared thoughts of billions. We waited. We prepared. We welcomed you. And now, we are one. The trap had been sprung. The galaxy would never be the same. The end